Josh, my friend, welcome back for round two. How you doing?
Very well, thank you, my friend. And yourself?
Yeah, good, good. How have the last couple of weeks treated you?
Couple of weeks have been good, very busy, and it's really surprising how working 3 days a week, I actually feel busier than when I was working a full-time job, like 5 days a week.
You know what? I think there's like this weird relationship between those two things. Like I know for me, I've been doing full time work and full time uni recently, and I still felt like I had time to spare. I hear stories of people doing like one subject at university, failing it because they just like, I don't know. I think time changes. I think busy people just like, I don't know. You always find ways to fill your time.
Oh yeah, I mean, there are definitely those people, even like as we're high school friends, remember a couple of people from high school. We won't name them just in case, but you know that there were these two girls that were super competitive and were just machines and just batted out way above average. And you're just like, how do you fit everything in? And it's like they just did.
But yeah, they're probably also like, yeah, going to dinner parties and parties here and, you know, a ball
Yeah.
there. And
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. People just make it work. I definitely, yeah. People like, you know, that classic saying, like, oh, you know, Beyonce has as many hours in the day as you do. I don't know if it's entirely true. I think some people just have like more supports that let them be more efficient with their time. But obviously, part of it as well is just like your personal
Yeah.
motivation and yeah.
Nice. And how about you, man? What's been going over the last couple of weeks?
What has been going on? Well, like, uni's wrapped up for the year, so I'm being a bit quiet on that front. Back to full time
Woo.
work, and finally had a couple days back in the office, which is a first time in quite a few months for Melbourne. Yeah,
Interesting, because obviously recently has been the gates have come up from the locked doors,
yeah.
which is nice.
It was kind of weird being back in the office though. Like everything's off.
Okay.
Places really need to be lived in to stay alive. You know, like things are dusty and there's just no life in the place. Really need people back
Okay.
to bring that in. So yeah, been well.
Good, very good.
So let's just kick things off, circling back to our previous podcast where we spoke about the US election. Obviously, in the meantime, it's happened. Could you call
Yes.
it? Would you say that it's over? Probably not.
No, it's not. And this was actually one of the things I wanted to discuss is I've been learning a little bit about how the electoral college works, and because I just thought, how does it actually work? And so I found out a few things, and honestly, my main resource was CGP Grey, which is a fairly famous YouTuber, and he's done a video series. But I've obviously looked a bit further than that. And yeah, so effectively, as it stands now, the people have voted for their representatives, and then the representatives are going to vote in December. I guess the reason they say it's all sort of done and dusted is they just assume that the representatives are going to vote the way the people vote. That's not a guarantee.
Okay.
And so in this world we're in, I feel like if it's not a guarantee, then anything could happen still. 2020 has made me think different about things.
Because there are a handful of states where the electoral college is bound by the votes directly, but there are a couple that most states that's not the case. There is some discretion about how they vote.
Yeah, absolutely. And just it's overwhelmingly complicated. There is a simple version, but yeah, essentially each state has 2 votes to start with, and then it's proportioned by population roughly. But this sort of means that 25% of people, approximately 25% of people in the US could vote for one side, and then that side would win. That's a worst case scenario, obviously, but it's just like, wow, how can a quarter of people vote one way and then that person win? It just seems crazy.
Yeah, that is wild. They also have heaps of people who don't vote, right?
Yeah, and I think my dad was actually just showing me this like newspaper article, and I was just having a look in that even though Donald Trump has sort of, at this stage, we believe he's going to lose. So the number of seats was 290 to 232. and obviously he's trying to say that votes weren't counted properly and there was fraud and all that sort of thing. But it was interesting to note that Trump this year actually got more votes than Obama did when he was successful.
Yeah, this is the biggest election ever, right? Most
So,
votes cast.
yeah, voting popularity went way, way, way up, which is, I think it's a good thing.
Yeah. I think voting should be very widely accessible. I mean, infinitely accessible. Do you think it should be mandatory? Do you like that it's mandatory in Australia?
I like it, I think, because I've grown up with it. I don't think it's fair to say, I think, like, if I was unbiased, I don't know what I would choose. I think just because I grew up in Australia where it is mandatory, I'm just like, this is the way it is, and therefore I like it.
I guess what it means is that you don't have to be as sexy as a politician because all you have to be is better than the other guy. And what that means, you don't have to, really sell stuff like a salesperson because they're going to have to buy one of the two. You just have to, try and convince them that you're better. Not that they should come out at all. There's this added element of, complexity. It's like not only do you have to be better than the other guy, you also have to be convincing enough to get them out of bed to begin with.
Yeah, so in your mind, there's almost like a lack of marketing that needs to happen because the barrier to entry has already been overcome.
Yeah, I mean, you don't even enter, you're in. All you have to do is register to vote once and you'll get a fine if you don't vote ever again.
That's right.
But I still feel some reservations about it because if people don't want to vote, should they have to? I don't know. I guess you can always donkey vote. Anyway.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I guess with the US election in general, the other thing I wanted to talk about is what's your opinion on sort of the news coverage as it stands? Like, to my understanding, I sort of could foresee all these shenanigans happening, and yet people are still going like, oh, I can't believe that this is happening. All this, I was like, it's totally predictable. Like, we knew this was coming. So what's your thoughts?
My thoughts is I think news media has overstepped their role in election coverage. People no longer wait for the results to be official exactly. They instead wait for a news agency to call the election. It's like, oh, well, CNN's called it. Oh, yeah, ABC's called it. Is that like a bit of an overstep of what news media is for? Surely they should just be reporting results rather than calling elections themselves.
I think there's an element to news that has to be entertaining for them to survive, to be fair on the side of news presenters. Like, if they were present a purely factual series of information, then I don't think they get the eyes on them in the same way that they do now, where there's a bit of entertainment, sort of flagging down people. What's it called in the the hear ye, or the get your paper days? I can't remember what it was called.
I also can't remember the word.
There's it's yellow something. I just don't know off the top of my head.
I don't have it either.
That's all right. Yeah, but I think you're right that they've overstepped it. I don't think that they have to be purely factual. There is,
I do get that element of theatrics where you've got to keep your listeners entertained, otherwise they'll stop listening. But I think it has gone too far, especially if you extend that to social media and how Twitter especially is flagging content for, this claim's contested. Oh, this isn't true. Read more about voter fraud here. Twitter's turned into this gatekeeper rather than a platform for people to share their views. I don't know. Do you think that's necessary? Do you think news media and social media has gone too far on that front?
I think there are some underlying problems that have led them to this position. But just briefly, the whole news the news format, internet versus your sort of mainstream media that we're used to, I think they're still trying to find their their settle point. They don't really know where they are. And honestly, I think they're just making some mistakes because they don't really know what they're doing and how to survive. Um, but to your question specifically, I'm not sure if I'm being honest.
Yeah. I guess it's, if you want to be an optimist in this world, you just assume they're being ignorant and making mistakes rather than they're being malicious and they're trying to, subdue people to their will.
I think you make a good point in that I think there is definitely some incentives that cause corruption, and therefore the overstep of the boundaries has resulted because of that. So there is some of that. I just don't know how much.
Yeah, agreed. Josh, we'll move on to your next section.
So squabbling over semantics. It's a new little section that I came up with, and basically it's little things that either Zach or I find a little bit annoying and meant to be lighthearted and that sort of thing. So my question this week is, when people talk about anything to do with life, they say, well, it's just a game. And I'm like, no, I don't think it is a game, because you don't understand what a game is. And then because there's not winners or losers, because winners and losers means there's an end. But I wanted to know what you thought.
Interesting. It's actually really funny you brought this up, because I have heard two very astute thinkers talk about this question. And they come at it from sort of two different angles. One is that life's not a game, but rather a series of games. And to truly win a game is to play fairly and enjoy it and be a good competitor so that you get invited back to play again. So
interesting. I like that. I really do.
If life was a game, let's say, then it wouldn't matter if you cheated and stole to win, because you play once and then you win.
Mm-hmm.
But if life's a series of games and you cheat and steal and play dirty in the first game, then you don't get invited back for the second.
Oh, I like that a lot. That's really good. That's really good. Yeah. I think my issue with the game analogy, it doesn't really hold true for individuals, because to me, a game has this sort of really definitive win condition. And to have a win condition, both sides of the party, or however many sides there are, have to agree upon what the win condition is. And so, like, in a game of Monopoly, it's the first person to bankrupt everyone else, which is a fantastic lesson to teach kids, right? But beyond that, individuals, their meaning of success should be up to the individual. And so no one's agreed upon it.
Right. I do think a lot of people spend their lives, and this whole complex is set up to try and tell people what their metric of success is.
Mm.
There's this classic.
And maybe they're playing that game.
Yeah. But there's a classic saying, this saying, I can't remember who said it. It's, you'll either have rules or you'll have rulers. And
okay. Yep.
The idea is that if you don't set your metric for what success looks like with rules and discipline and the rest of it, someone else will set them for you.
I 100% agree with that, because there are so many times that I see particularly high school and university students thinking, well, this is the way the world works because someone's told me. And it's really, really overused, this saying, but you grow up to learn that basically no one knows what they're doing, except for the few people that forge their own path and say, well, the thing is, you're playing a game I don't want to play in, so I'm just going to do my own thing. And they end up really, really successful in their own way, whatever that might be.
I think that's a key part of strong people and strong communities, is that they get to determine what success looks like and the path they want to go down.
But yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about. It's just so frustrating when people say the word game, because I just I feel like you just don't understand what a good game is.
Do you feel like all games have winners and losers though? Like a lot of MMOs, for example, you don't win.
Interesting. I hadn't thought about that. There's almost like an understanding of what success is in life when you play an MMO because you're just happy doing the things that you're doing. So, like, whether you're, I don't know, farming wood or slaying monsters or something like that, there's just this pleasure in the journey. Although, at the same time, I think the problem with those games is people want to see numbers go up, and that's kind of the win condition, but then it's a floating target that people try to just keep pushing and pushing and pushing. So yeah, it's tricky. I think there still is a win condition with those games. It's just a floating win condition, which can be kind of worse in some ways.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's why they're so addictive, right? Actually, speaking of that, do you think that video gaming itself is a waste of time?
No.
Just straight up no?
I saw this in the show notes and I'm like, no. It's no. Like, it's almost like this question has a undertone of like generational problems where I just disagree with the way that you spend your fun time. And I'm just like, it doesn't matter. Each generation has their own way of spending fun time. And if this generation, I mean, we're starting from video gaming would have been 70s, 80s now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're now sort of 40, 50 odd years into video gaming. I think this question is going away a little bit. And it's sort of moved on to social media in a way. But yeah, video gaming to me is not a waste of time. But like anything, if it takes over your life in such a way that the opportunity cost becomes really high, so, you know, you're unable to gain employment or to earn enough to satisfy daily needs and wants, so, you know, food, water, shelter, that sort of thing, then it's a problem, but not a waste of time, if that makes sense.
Interesting. I think I disagree. I love video games, but I think they're a waste of time.
Ooh,
except in the context of playing with friends over, you know, in a chat room of some sort. I think if you're socializing with people who you couldn't otherwise socialize with, and you're doing that through the medium of video games, I think that's totally fine. Mm-hmm. But I think sitting down and just playing video games by yourself, while it's fun and I enjoy doing it, I think it's a waste of time. Because I think it tricks your brain into thinking it's progressed, and it's hitting like these primal buttons of success and progress. And it's like pokies. You know, you feel like you're winning and you're improving and you're stronger and you're doing like physical activities in the game and this and that and this. I just think it's almost like this override button that for some people, they get their sense of progress and satisfaction and contribution to the world in a virtual realm, which takes away from their potential to do that in the real world.
Okay, so I have a thought on this, in that there is, if you allocate your life into two buckets, and this is very generically speaking, but, you know, you have work and the thing that allows you to live, and then you have everything else. And in that everything else, to me, there are like hobbies and interests which can feel productive, and then there are other things that are non-productive. But the way I think of this is that video gaming is a form of non-productive fun or hobby or interest. And in the same way as going to the park and just sitting there is a same sort form of fun, hobby, interest. You know, it's non-productive, but people wouldn't say that's a waste of time. But at the other end of the scale, there are productive hobbies or interests which sort of increase a skill set, or you make something at the end of the day, like music or woodworking or anything creative, really, where you end up with a product at the end of the day. So I just hope when people are thinking about this question that they're not thinking all my downtime has to be productive in one form or another. I think there needs to be a level of acceptance that part of that non-work time can be unproductive in whatever way you like.
I completely agree with you in the sense that I really hate. You see it on LinkedIn a lot, like productivity porn. Like, yeah, just crunched out a 50-hour week. We must spare time, doing this masters and also learning woodworking and also this and that and this. And you realize this person is just like, first of all, just putting on a front, but also they never actually unwind. They never just like
Yeah.
chill out and do whatever they feel like.
Yeah.
I've
Yeah,
actually hit this
for sure.
weird like roadblock with this with chess. I love playing chess. It's like a huge part of my
Yes,
downtime.
I remember being stomped by you multiple occasions by chess. You were part of the chess club at the uni that you went to.
That's true.
Yeah.
And I love it. I think chess is fantastic. I'm by no means a professional chess player. Like if I were to play in a chess club now, I would struggle to get a draw. I think I'd be cleaned up pretty much every game. But I love it. And I think people have it in their mind that chess is like this intellectual pursuit and he plays chess. Like he's a real thinker, whatever it is. Oh, that's not
Flash sideways to the Queen's Gambit Netflix series.
fantastic show, by the way.
Really good.
It. Yeah. And but I also feel like sometimes I'm playing chess and I play for like 2 hours and I think, what was that? Was that fun? Was that unwinding? Was that intellectual? It feels this really strange spot for me because I think its perception is this intellectual game that, people study and it makes you smart, or smart people play chess, whatever. I often just piss away time playing chess.
Yeah. And I think this was something I wanted to bring up earlier because you sort of talked about when video gaming, as long as there's a social aspect, you're less likely to say it's a waste of time. I've recently got into board gaming in a really big way, and no one, regardless of the age, has told me it's a waste of time because they, one, think it's time away from screens, and two, it's time spent with other people. And for that reason, it sort of just puts it in this separate category where it's actually really, really good.
Absolutely. I completely agree. I think board gaming in person with people is delightful. If I could spend my whole life doing that, I'd do it.
And is that not chess?
I'd play chess online with strangers.
Okay. Right. Interesting.
At like a local chess club, just like playing over the board with people at the chess club, that to me could never be a waste of time.
So it's almost like, it is the person who wields the tool can decide whether it's wasteful or not. And
maybe the difference is if your gaming is withdrawing you from the world, or if it is instead like an avenue by which you explore it. Like with board games, different people might come and you meet new people, you play new games, you're exploring something together with other people. And, maybe playing chess over the board at a chess club lets you meet new people and you're engaging in activities you wouldn't have otherwise. And then someone invites you for a beer after, whatever it is. I think that just like grinding some World of Warcraft at home for 8 hours on a Friday night is withdrawing you from the world rather than helping you explore it.
Okay. No, I think that's fair enough.
So I guess it's also on like the same front about, saying like video gaming is this phenomenon of the last 50 years. I'd say another phenomenon of the last 50 years is screen-based careers. I know, Josh, you were an accountant for a time, and I assume a lot of that time was staring at monitors in an office.
Oh, yeah.
This is a recent phenomenon, right? Like, we haven't always been doing this. Even accountants 50 years ago would have been, books, pens, paper, whatever.
Not even 50 years ago.
30? 20?
Yeah. I mean, like, my first job, we were sort of like, we're moving to paperless. And I was just like, well done for being 2 decades late.
Yeah. But it's become quite pervasive, like in every industry. You'd think that accountants are probably one of the first to go, being like spreadsheets and number crunching. But
should be, yeah.
Architects, it used to be, drafting, drawing, big sketchbooks and, drawing these lines of what you're going to create. Now it's all computer generated this. It seems like every career is moving towards it rapidly, especially in like this knowledge class, your engineers, lawyers, accountants, economists, these sorts of people.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it's something that we can keep up as a species? Do you think this is something that will, you know, how people are rapidly moving towards more natural ways of eating and living with, you know,
Hmm.
organic diet this, whole food vegan this. They try and emulate the more natural lives we had centuries or millennia ago.
Yeah, of course.
And I think this is really good for us. You know, people talk about like holistic health and being quite natural in their ways of life. Yet I think there's this countercurrent going on the whole time where our working is becoming more and more unnatural. Very sedentary lives, sitting down all day, staring at screens.
Yeah. Okay. So my thoughts in general are that this is just the interface of the time, and the time will change and go on. And eventually the interface will change again based on basically what's most efficient, and it doesn't necessarily appease the holistic view of the people that use them. So, if I were to have a guess or a prediction, I would say that, I mean, keyboards and mice are horrible, horrible tools for conveying information from our brain to another medium, because we think it's really efficient and it's just not, because our brain capacity is just so much better than what we can manually input through a keyboard or mouse. And so I think it'll just change, and potentially it'll be some brain computer interface, and therefore screens can sort of go away. I'm not sure if it's going to be Tony Stark level sort of, you know, throwing Windows up in front of you regardless of where it is in the room, and you know, you swipe this and flick that, and then all the information in your brain just goes into the system. I don't know if it's going to be quite that good, but it could be.
You know, it's funny because I completely disagree with you.
Okay.
I think that if efficiency was the only driving factor, then we'd all be eating, you know, nutrient rich mush that just kept us like alive and healthy, and it was cheap and easy to administer, and you don't have to go grocery shopping anymore and the rest of it. I think people like variety. I think people don't like efficiency. I think they like romance and the adventure, and you know, I don't think we're looking for that. I don't think people necessarily want that.
Yeah, it could be just me looking at things a bit pessimistically and sort of saying, I'm really sort of honing in on the work aspect of our life, which I don't know. I'm pulling a fake random number out of my head. I would say 90% of the population don't enjoy their job. And so, and I don't think that's changed for a very, very long time. And so, if I'm specifically looking at work where the driver is generally speaking profit for the business, then that's why I think the efficiency interface route is going to happen. But in life, holistically, I think it's a different story.
Yeah, okay, I definitely see that because I also think this whole work from home business that's obviously been a result of pandemic. I think you're completely on the money with that in that this has been pushed because it's actually more profitable for companies.
Okay, yeah.
Well, the first step is you can expand without buying more real estate. All you have to do
Yes.
is send your new
Yep.
employee a laptop and say, hey, figure it out. Here's
Yeah.
$300 to buy yourself a screen. Offices
Yeah.
are crazy expensive to run.
Oh yeah. I mean, rent and buildings and electricity and all those sort of things that you can just sort of pass on to the individual who's sort of already paying for it anyway, whether they're home or not, is just, it's an efficiency gain, but at the same time we're sort of in this awkward point where not everyone has the ability or the understanding to maximize their efficiency at home. Actually, I think no one knows how to maximize their efficiency at home yet.
I think a big part of that is that we're trying to emulate the old way of working in a new environment rather than
Hmm.
letting our environment sort of work synergistically with how our work is meant to be. You know, we're trying to like
Yeah.
emulate old office events and catch ups and whatever, just like by directly translating them onto our screens. I'm not sure that's working.
Yeah, and I see even YouTubers are sort of saying, I'm going to find an office space because I think I'm just going to be so much more productive.
Totally.
And and I think they're right in their thinking at this stage, but I think the evolution of that is actually finding the ultimate workspace at home, in that they've just learned how to do it so much better. I don't know whether it's a separation of the spaces or just the way we interface with work in the future. I don't know how it will be, but there's definitely a way to make at home working much better than it is now.
You know what's so funny though is that for so long, the norm for a lot of people in Australia, across the world, was to live above or behind their shop.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Like my
Yeah.
dad growing up in, regional New South Wales,
Hmm.
his parents ran like a small goods shop and they lived behind it. And that was just their normal. And
Yes.
the whole like idea that, design the perfect office space at home, this like perfect second space, for you to be max productivity and still so convenient. It's almost like we're just rediscovering old technology.
That's true. I hadn't thought of that because, I mean, obviously there are third world countries that do that just because they have to. So, traveling through Vietnam, I was lucky enough to go there probably a decade ago now. But, every shop front was just the home of the family that lived there out the back. So, yeah, maybe there is something to be said about, we just didn't quite understand the potential of the technology or the structure that we had decades ago.
Yeah, and now that's like a big selling point. Like I live in Melbourne, and obviously the whole like local family run business or cafe or whatever it is like a huge selling point for whole suburbs.
Hmm. Interesting.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
on the work front, I'd like to make a prediction, Josh. And I know we
Hmm.
don't do this very often, and I don't like to, once you make a prediction, suddenly people are going to hold you account to it. But I
Okay.
would like to predict that someone in the near future, at some stage in the near future, there'll be an architecture firm that goes offline. They'll go back to drafting on paper.
Okay. And what does that achieve in your mind?
What that achieves in my mind is that I think you would attract a very different and a laterally thinking talent base.
Okay. Okay. And do you think that's available to architecture specifically because of what it is?
I think it would possibly yield the biggest changes and maybe the biggest profit for architecture, just because the changes would be a visible, tangible thing in the sense that maybe if
Hmm.
you draw, you actually design different buildings, and maybe those
Yeah.
buildings are in a different style that people like or whatever it is. But I think for
Okay.
other industries, it might hold as well in a way. Like, imagine if there was a company that right now does all of their, maybe they once were all in person and now all of their support is online, and they start reopening in person support hubs. Like, I think Apple sort of did that, right?
Yeah, with the Apple Town centers or whatever it is. Or is that Google? I can't remember.
Yeah, I think it's like a big thing in tech is to like reinvigorate like the personal support network.
Yeah, because it's kind of a funny thing is that the people that don't need tech support are the people that are just going to be at home anyway and search their problems online. So the people that do need tech support need that in person thing. So I think there is a synergy there. On the other end of the scale, though, I honestly think there's no going back for accounting. Um, there's in terms of paper, at least, I can see a lot of it being automated as such. And then if you're automating a lot of the mechanical stuff, the conversational or the strategy end could be done in person, as long as there's some sort of interface to directly create inputs that work from that sort of higher order thinking that creates or does the work for you. It's a little bit tricky. I don't see accounting being an easy transition into this ultimate, oh well, a next tier in work life interface.
Yeah. It's funny because there are a couple industries that can really see aren't working in a new format. Like teaching, for example. I think kids need to be in class. And I think the less time they spend staring at their screens growing up, the better. I live quite
Yeah.
near a school, and I saw like all these kids the other day, like 5 or 6 year olds, just like sliding down a hill, just getting completely filthy, just like rolling around, whatever. And the teachers were just watching them, and I was thrilled
Oh,
to see it.
that's cool. That's cool.
It was like that was their class for the day. It was just like roll around and be silly and get muddy.
Yeah.
And
Oh man.
I just can't help but feel like there's this push to get away from this thing that's been like forced on us in this like digital revolution. I'm not saying we should go back to bloody counting on an abacus, but I think I'm obviously very appreciative of the efficiencies that technology has afforded us. Like us being able to record this 2,000 kilometers away from each other is a blessing that technology has given us. And that's enhanced our efficiency and enhanced the quality of this production. I just think that it's not. I think the next step for a lot of industries is actually going to look like the previous step in a way.
And what's the next step?
I think the result of this technological revolution will instead push some industries away from technology and back to that interpersonal, like, playing chess over the board instead of online.
I think as long as there's demand there, I think you're right. And eventually there'll be this enough of a sway from the people to say, yes, this is what we want. This is how we want to work. Perhaps we start valuing quality over reduced prices. It could be a number of things, but as long as people want for it to happen and the financial incentives are there and they sort of marry up somehow, I think you're right. There are some big walls to break through in my mind, but once we're there, it could be a very interesting new world.
Yeah, we'll just have to wait and see.
I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. I think we've spoken a lot about, today, the best ways to interface with others. But I think one other thing that's become quite apparent in, pandemic times is the need to be able to productively and in a satisfying way fill time alone. Do you feel particularly comfortable, in your own company?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, being an accountant obviously helps in that I'm used to working on my own thing for extended periods of time. But also, I think I was a little bit that way already, just being a only child. I find a lot of my hobbies and interests work really well solo. So I think I'm reasonably good at that sort of thing, but I can see other people struggling yeah, struggling a lot.
So what do? You wake up tomorrow, let's say you got nothing on. What does your day look like?
It's interesting because I don't know what the day looks like when I first wake up, but I've got to a point where I have enough options and enough motivational drive that my mind tells me what I want to do, and I just start doing it. I must admit, though, I probably do spend about half an hour like watching TV or a phone just to properly wake up, which is not great. But, I've been spending off days starting, woodworking at 7, then I'll have breakfast at 8:30 or 9, and then I'll go back to woodworking. And then in the afternoon, I'll edit the podcast that we're doing, for example, or come up with logos. And then I might do some of that non-productive downtime in the afternoon, have a nap, watch a Formula One or something like that. Then it's sort of dinner time, and might help make dinner and have a chat with my dad over dinner, and then yeah, it's sort of 8 o'clock, and I can just watch TV. So it's just a series of productive, non-productive, in a little bit of interaction with people, but not too much. As long as as long as there's a enough of a few things, it eats up your day so quickly.
And you don't really plan it?
No, no, not at all. I always try to be as efficient as possible with the things I'm doing because it's usually got a learning outcome. A lot of my hobbies do because I either want to get better at guitar, I want to learn this song, and there's a finish point. Um, and I'm very confident in knowing when I've hit the finish point that I'm comfortable with. And that's enough depth for me to go into, and that'll carry me like a fortnight and then I'll jump onto something completely different.
Cool. I think it's really interesting you don't plan your day at all.
Yeah. Yeah, I like it. It's really good. I'm very fortunate in that I don't have to. But yeah, I just think there are so many really, really cool things that inspire me. Um, I will add a caveat to all of this in that I'm fortunate enough to have set myself in a financial position where I can afford this. And I don't think everybody could. I think you can find ways around it, but not use the same sort of application that I have.
Interesting. I think a lot of hobbies that people would, they say they'd love to start actually do have a really high entry barrier.
Mm-hmm.
Woodworking, I think, is a possibly prime example of that.
Mm-hmm.
Tools, materials, the rest of it. It can be quite daunting for someone who doesn't know if they even like it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there are men's sheds. Like I'm part of a men's shed, but then even then, is there's a barrier to entry in terms of do you fit in with the people at the men's shed, or are you a woman? Like then that immediately makes it a lot more difficult. I hadn't really thought about that. I hope there are community worker spaces for women to attend. Maybe that's something I should think about.
It's interesting you bring up the social barrier to entry as well, because I think that's the unspoken one. You might really want to get into one of these things, but if you don't know who does it, and if when you go there you feel unwelcome, then the rest of it. I remember once I was looking into bow hunting, just sort of
Oh,
on a
cool.
whim. I was like,
Mhm,
oh, this would be, I'm interested to see if there's a bow hunting community. What's it take to actually get into bow hunting? What's the financial costs to, get started, the rest of it. And I went
mhm.
to, supposedly the best bow hunting shop in Brisbane.
Mhm.
And I felt so unwelcome there. I was
Oh,
served by
wow.
one young dude who didn't really know what he was talking about. Everything looked really foreign. The part of town I was in was really uncomfortable to me. The rest of it, everything about it was I don't belong here.
That's really unfortunate. I really don't like that.
I, I sure enough asked 3 or 4 questions and then I just got out of there.
Ah, that's a really big shame. That is. Yeah.
But, what do you do about that? It would really take someone
Very
who
little.
really, really wanted to be into bow hunting to have that experience and then still get into bow hunting. You'd have to, be the one in 10,000 who are that keen on something they've never done before.
And I think there's another thing to this in that you're not an introverted person either. I don't think you're super extroverted, but you're comfortable talking with people. And so if you are introverted, this problem gets so much worse. And so I think we get into sort of in the show notes, I can see that you've mentioned a couple of other things like games and TV are just such a low barrier to entry. Maybe that's why people get into them.
Absolutely, it's right there. Everyone's got a laptop.
Hmm.
Just jump on.
And it's a shame. It really is a shame. I hope that people regardless of who they are, have the opportunity to jump into a hobby. And I must admit, there's a likelihood that you could fail quite a few times until you find something that works. Particularly in particular circumstances, it can be very, very difficult.
Do you think your hobbies are then more determined by your social standing than they are by your like individual interests?
It could well be. And it's just like anything. You talk to someone, they offer you an opportunity, and you just go down that path. That's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, that's how I got into bouldering is I got introduced to it through a friend, years ago. And then I just thought of it, this year, sort of saying, actually, no, that's a really good hobby I should pick up. Like, I just will forego my normal gym membership and get a new membership with the bouldering club. And so,
Or you had this in, you had
like,
this person who introduced you.
that's right. So I had that initial person, and I think bouldering could be replaced with a number of other sports, but I still see there being problems in that, you need to almost know someone who's going to point you in the right direction. I've always wanted to play Ultimate Frisbee, for example, or I think they just call it Ultimate now for copyright reasons. And yeah, I just found it too difficult to get started because I just didn't know anyone, and then the location was too far, and then that was enough. That was
Yeah,
enough to
two
make
little
me stop.
things. Yeah.
Yeah,
Am I really going to drive all this way every time I want to play? I don't even know anyone. I'm just not going to go. Done.
yeah, yeah, that's right. And I think once I got there, it would have been really good. But yeah, it's very, very easy to get down the wrong path before you get onto the right one.
Absolutely. And so much of it's about like convenience, like proximity almost. I
Mhm,
only think I stuck with martial arts while I was in Brisbane because there was a gym so close to me.
mhm, mhm. Did you enjoy that, by the way?
I loved it. I recommend martial arts to
Yeah.
everybody. I was
Mhm.
doing Muay Thai and Brazilian Jiu Jitsu.
Nice.
Much more into Muay Thai than the BJJ.
Okay. And was there like what was the philosophy behind that? Because I know certain martial arts have different sort of philosophies. Like most of them are purely defensive, but others are, yeah, slightly different.
These, I would say, are both quite unique in the sense that their origins are not really in like that philosophy, that creed. It's like the big difference between judo and jujitsu. Judo is like a way of life. Jujitsu is just a fighting combat sport.
Hmm.
And I think that and the other thing is like with Muay Thai, especially Muay Thai doesn't have belts, which is quite unusual
Uh,
for a martial art. You're
yeah. So
only
does it have tiers still though?
does it have what? Sorry,
Like tiers or like grades?
no, nothing.
Nothing.
So
Interesting.
the foundations of Muay Thai, for example, are very much so in like a wartime setting. And Muay Thai was like taught to Thai warriors to use when they have no weapons.
Okay. Okay.
And
So it's a essential skill almost.
yeah, and in Thailand, because there's such like this warrior history of it, there's nobody who just does Muay Thai for fun or for fitness. If you train, you fight.
Hmm.
And if you're training and not fighting, they're like, what are you doing?
Hmm.
So it's not about like some sort of self discipline, whatever. It's truly like you practice this fighting so you can get in the ring and fight someone.
Oh wow.
Yeah. And or, you know, your tier, like what you're saying before, is just your fight
Hmm.
record. How many fights have you been in? How many fights have you won?
Just how tough as nails, how many battle scars
Yeah,
you
it's
have.
brutal.
There you go. But yeah, I guess to round out the conversation, feeling in solo time, there are definitely barriers to entry. But have you got any final thoughts on it?
I don't know. I think I used to be better at it than I am now, which is strange. But again, I've got like a handful of hobbies that I quite like enjoy. I like to do in my solo time, like playing piano and teaching myself Greek. I've just sort of found them less satisfying recently.
Okay. And so do you think you'll just find something new or what's your thoughts?
I've been
Yeah,
getting quite into
yeah.
skipping though. Have you ever skipped?
I mean at the gym occasionally,
Yeah.
but not in a hobby way.
Yeah, I've been trying to. You can't do it very long. That's probably part of the issue. It's just so exhausting.
Yeah, it really is. It's so tough.
Yeah, but that's probably another one of like the solo things that I've been doing. I don't know. I just struggle with it. I used to be good at it. Um, the other thing I've been trying to do recently, which is not really a hobby, but I guess it can be depending on how you look at it. I'm trying to watch more movies, but very like particular ones, not just like
Yeah, it's
whatever's
interesting
popping
you
up on
say that.
Netflix. Yeah,
Yeah. There's
uh,
almost this aversion to long form content these days.
absolutely. People just want like these little bite-sized pieces. They'll watch 10 episodes,
Yeah.
but as long as they're less than an hour each, no worries.
Yeah. Yeah. And I find movies actually really, really good to watch because you are engaged for a period of time
There's
that
more
you feel like,
substance.
yeah, there is more substance and it's it's not sort of as repetitive because, short form things usually have you go intro, middle, outro so many
And
times
even within
within
that,
2 hours. It can feel like you've done nothing because all you've done is intro, middle, outro.
yeah, and then even within that, the same shows are quite formulaic. They rely on like the same formulas to get through their 22 minutes or
Yeah.
whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've watched two recently. I watched a French film called Pauline on the Beach, and it was just like a French romance. It was probably like 1980s or something. Um,
Mhm.
it was just like all dialogue, all in French. Really quite liked it. Um, Quite subdued, and it was sort of about like a love triangle. It was really interesting. And then today I watched Fury, that 2014 war film with Brad Pitt.
Oh, okay.
Have you seen it?
Yeah. I have not.
I used to hate war films, but the last couple I've seen have all been really good. Dunkirk and
Yeah.
Fury are both exceptional. And there was that other one.
Okay.
Is it called like 1914 or 1917?
Oh, yeah.
And it's
Something like
like
that.
it's like
Yeah.
filmed in one shot from a soldier's
Mhm.
point of view.
Oh, yes. Yeah, no, I have heard of that. I haven't seen it, but I know I've seen people try to replicate like sort of one-shot movements
Yeah.
because they're inspired by that movie, and it's just phenomenal videography.
This has gone very off track, but the last 10 years of war films have been really, really good.
Interesting. So the war genre hasn't died in your eyes?
Not at all. I think it's only getting better. And I think part of that is like people are changing. I think people recognize more complexity of war. I think it was like a time where everything was like very jingoist and, how good's the US Army. And there was a time it was like very popular to criticize the army with like, you know, anti-war
Yeah.
films. But
Yeah.
now we're at this
Yeah.
point, like this synthesis stage where we look at war films as being like quite complex.
Like we're getting into the detail of what really happened, and we're not so much interested in who won and who lost, but rather the motivations behind them. Do you think that's right?
Just like the recognition of like the humanity in everyone who's part of war. And
Yeah.
there's a moment in Fury. This isn't a spoiler exactly. Also, the movie's
Mhm.
6 years old. Grow up. Where an SS soldier in the Nazi German army shows mercy to a, US soldier who's like stuck by himself, and he like sees him there, looks him in the eye, and then just like doesn't kill him.
Yes.
And I
Yeah.
think
Okay.
that, war films of days gone by would never have shown a Nazi soldier being human.
Oh yeah, it was very much Nazis equal bad. Anything else equals good.
And obviously, like, I still
That-
like subscribe to that the Nazis were horrible, but to
Yeah.
then recognize that they were horrible, but also had like glimpses of humanity, and that in another world that could have been you or I think was portrayed really well in Fury. And
Yeah.
I just really like this cultural zone that war films are at.
That's good. Where do war films go from here though?
I don't know. I hope they stay here forever. I really like them. They've turned into dramas more than action films. Because there was that whole
Yeah,
era,
okay.
I would say, just before this era of like
Mhm,
Saving Private Ryan, where it's like,
mhm.
holy hell, look at these US soldiers just going in. Look how brave they are, killing all these
Yes.
enemies. They're heroes. And
Yeah, that's cringy these
yeah,
days.
I'm
Hasn't
so
aged
glad
well.
we've moved past that, but haven't gone so
Yeah,
far past that we only see soldiers as like brutes.
yeah, exactly. Oh dear. As long as they, as long as the genre doesn't get overkilled like they have in the video game industry,
Oh
we should
yeah,
be fine.
God. Hey, do you think James Bond films are going to exist in the future?
James Bond. As long as there's money.
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't know. Hey, potentially for a while, but the tipping point will be obvious when it does happen.
yeah. I don't think we're there yet because they
No,
have they
I
have
think there's
truly been
there's a few
producing
left.
like the same style of film for how long? It's been decades, right? 40 years.
Oh, I'd say more than that. Hang on, give me a sec. I'm gonna quickly look
I
this up.
have to know.
I have to know.
But
First
it's funny
Bond
because they have all of
film.
like these stereotypes, right? It's like this heroic, romantic British spy, and there's always like the Bond girl, and she's always like gorgeous and dressed to the nines. And oh yeah, as long as you're this heroic, strong man, you can save the world, and then whisk away the beauty. And yeah, I just think that's been this formula that worked so well for so long, but where a lot of other genres have like changed with the times. Bond films have been almost exactly the same.
Yeah, and but the thing for me is that they can just extend the series or the franchise by changing to reflect, modern opinions on how things should work in society. So whether or not it's as simple as, there's a heroine that saves Bond or something like that instead. That could be well the case. It's a very simple way of changing the dynamic. But yeah, just briefly having a look. 1963.
They're almost 60 years old.
Yes.
Man, to produce the same film for 60 years, I wonder what it is. Is it just like the super high production value of it?
I think there's almost like a branding behind it. There's
Yeah.
I like these types of movies. I'm going to watch another one. Almost like when you're at the end of your favorite series that you've been binging and you think, wow, there's 400 episodes in this series, like, I don't know, Friends or Seinfeld or, some of the anime series that I watch. And you get to the end and you're just like, this pit of despair of, what do I do now?
Yeah.
Um, Bond, on the other hand, is just like, I never die.
Just always back.
Just always back.
I have to respect it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you?
I think I like
It's
James
impressive.
Bond. I think I'm a fan.
As a character.
As a character, as a series, I think I just like it. I know this is like the least controversial opinion I probably hold, is that James Bond films are good.
Yeah. Welcome to the
Yeah.
Elbow Cat podcast, where we get to the nitty gritty and really bring up controversy.
Should
Oh,
we?
I like James Bond. He's really good. He's really good. And he always saved the girl.
Should
That's
we
nice.
start a spin-off podcast, Josh, where we just give positive reviews to the most popular
Really
movies?
popular thing.
Yeah. I think the Beatles were a good band.
If we want to make money, this is a surefire way of making money.
The Godfather series, quite good.
Yeah. Fantastic.
The Sopranos,
Some would say
great TV show.
number 2.
We should wrap this later.
Yeah, we will. Absolutely.
That'd be a pretty quick devolution of our show, going from like thought-provoking topics to reviewing the most popular films of all time.
Oh, yeah. Straight to the gutter.
I think that's all I have for today, Josh. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I think I'm pretty much good too. So we've been going for quite some time. We finished on a light note this time, which I appreciate.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, it was very, very serious last time. So I'm glad that we had a
We had a bit of
more,
fun.
a bit more joy just talking about, the good old days when in 1963, when the first Bond film came out. And the character is still as good as it is today.
Good as
Same
ever.
with war films. We're really, really progressive people. You can tell.
I'm gonna watch James Bond filmed after this, I think.
You reckon?
Yeah,
I
maybe.
don't think I can stay up that late. It's 7:30, dude.
Man, it's 8:30
That's
for me.
pretty late. Yeah, I know.
Maybe I should
Jeez,
just
you're
go
a
to
wild
bed.
man.
I'll just go to bed and dream of Bond instead.
That's schmexy, man.
All right, that was fun, Josh. Until next time.
I had a lot of fun. It was good. Yeah. Catch you later.
Catch you, mate. That was really fun.